So his Saturn in the first house, that means he's almost got, it's going to go around it, but they're not, you see the first of the midheaven, it's only 60 degrees, 62 degrees, and the first quadrant, first house to the IC is like long time, so it's going to be 4 years of five years of Saturn from the midheaven to the ascendant, but probably 9 to 10 years of going from the ascendant down to the IC, same way. So the quadrants, his quadrants are really distinct when it comes to that Saturn moving around across the angles. But Saturn to itself is going to start in the first house. It's going to first 12 years is below the horizon, and it's going to go above. And I'm just doing this so you can see from the chart how to work the Saturn. It's going to come along, but Saturn's not. It starts square the moon, so 7 years later it's going to square the moon, age 7. And then it's when it conjuncts the sun, it'll be about 12. When it opposes Saturn, 14. It's going above the horizon but just before it builds up to the peak at 21, 22, Saturn's opposing his moon. And then it reaches his midheaven. And then it comes down and crashes over his ascendant. Then it goes down a long period of self-reflection, understanding, hits the motivation again, he builds up again, goes through the cycle again. So we're going to try and follow some of this through. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the Saturn graph. Okay, this is it's one of my earlier styles of doing the Saturn graph. The ones we've been using have the zodiac signs around it, so you can put the planets in the signs. And this one put the shell as Saturn, and the corners or the edges of the shell were the 7 at the 7 year or 4 at the quarters, the 90-degree aspects of the main squares, and there's 45-degree aspects in between. So you can see the shell of life as the ego crystallized, life crystallized. So you can see how the shell built up. So that's the Saturn cycle showing the shell. I kind of liked it because the Saturn cycle right there as the shell, and then the dates are put on it. So, but then his sun, because his sun's on the descendant, anything that hits his ascendant is going to hit his sun or descend. And when things go from the above the horizon to below, or from below to above, it's doubly significant because his sun, they call it accidentally dignified, but it's strong right on the angle. But it's not connected to it's not connected in the same way to the MCIC. It's connected to the ascendant descendant. So we put the suns in, so we're going to have some dates equivalent. So the let's see. Okay, I want to pull this up. I'm going to pull this over just a little bit here. I'm going to make the chart a little smaller. And pull it up over here. And I want to bring in some of his history. And the first part of his history we'll put here. Bring in the second part. Okay, we'll put it over here. Second part there, we'll put the first part here. I guess we'll put the chart down lower. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we only see Saturn. Saturn, in this case, Saturn's at the bottom. It builds up. It's going to go around. And 80. Let's see. First thing we have in his chart, born in 85, moved to Basel in 79. When he's 4, so Saturn, that's still down, and Saturn was coming. Oh, even before the moon, it moved to Saturn, Basel. Okay, it conjuncted his Uranus. No, it's progressed Saturn. The Saturn's down the side here. Okay, so we have it conjuncted the IC in 82, but it conjuncted his descendant and conjuncted the sun. This is a really interesting time because when Saturn came around and conjuncted his sun in 88, 87, 88, there were things in his progress chart which we'll get to, but he was having trouble with school. and he didn't want to go to school. So he would faint and act, and so he didn't have to go. So he had a disassociation factor going on as, I don't want to school. So his definition was, I don't want to go to school. And he used to faint to avoid going so he could stay home. You see his moon Pluto behavior pattern acting out, and the sun, but the Saturn was not his sun as that happened. But in his biography, it said he learned about neuroses by being able to do that. And the story is more in the progressions, which will come around to when the progressed sun conjuncted Uranus at the same time. That was the breakthrough that made the Saturn transit a little bit more unstable. But he's young at that point, so he becomes the University of Basel by 94, but by 87, when 97, it's a long way from Saturn to get from the sun up to the midheaven. But in 97, when Saturn hit his midheaven, his father died. Okay, so this was highly active both in the transits and the progression. So we'll be coming around to this, but his father died just as he's at a point of status. So his Saturn's on the first house, and he's ruled by Saturn. This is strong points. His authority, his position, his dad's not there. He's not going to have help from his dad to get in position or whatever, if he ever did. But he's in position, and he's got to go further. Okay, so after this, Saturn goes by. It's going to go by from the midheaven. He would carry on for a few years, but by over here, 2003, it would be conjunct his ascendant. Okay, so in this period between the midheaven and conjunct the ascendant, he finished his degree. He got his PhD. It's not a learning thing. He was proving he could do it. He got his PhD. He got married, and this was his whole beginning of being married. He got married with Saturn in the 12th house, opposing his sun. Okay. Then he went through the identity crisis at the same time. Saturn went below. So let's just see. In 2000, 2002. Yeah, I graduated in what's wrong here? Not 2000, it's 19. Excuse me, that's wrong. That's my generation spinning over here. It's not, as it went into 1902. His father died in 1896, 97, and then conjuncted his midheaven in 97. And it went along, and he graduated. He got graduated in 1900, and he graduated with Saturn up in the 10th house, and he got a job working at the Bergolzi Mental Hospital in Zurich, and he continued working on his PhD there. So that he achieved it. Okay, and then we'll just go ahead here. We'll just go ahead and get some of these things. So Saturn comes along. From there, it opposes his sun, and this was just very shortly after he got married. And at that time, he published his book on the psychology and pathology of so-called occult phenomena. So he wrote that as Saturn was opposing his sun. So you can see his sun Neptune, Saturn opposed it, but he had to defend it or something. So that was the beginning. Now, the Saturn return shortly thereafter would have been in 2005, and he started lecturing at Zurich University. So he's going through his learning stage, his personal growth and development stage. He's set up in career, but he's really just personally growing. He started building up his own thing during this time. Because by the time Saturn hits ascendant, he's already 28 years old. So it's like his world really began late. This was his start on his own. It hit his IC in 2010, 2011. So it hit his IC 2010 and 11. He let's see, 1910, 11. In this time, during this time of learning, he met Jung, and he went through the second, third house. He met Jung, and he was really motivated. By the time it hit his IC, when he gave up his work at Bogolzi, and he opened his own private practice of psychoanalysis, which he kept going from his own death. So this was just before in the third house as was hitting his moon. And then Saturn came along and squared his ascendant and his sun. He adjusted his goal. He became chairman for life of the International Psychoanalytical Association. And by the time Saturn went down to hit his IC, his lowest point, it's opposing his career. Saturn's opposing his career, opposing his midheaven. It's on the IC. And he declared his scientific independence from Freud, and he published The Psychology of the Unconscious. And in that same year, Saturn's on the IC. It's motivational. You don't know what you want. You know what you don't want. You don't want to put up with the same environment. So by the time he got to the IC, he didn't want to have anything more to do with it. He was not thinking the same way. We're going different ways. So he pulled away. And he pulled away. I think Freud personally pulled away first, but this pulled away even more socially around what they were doing. So this was on the IC. So a powerful thing of moving away from that. However, in the moving away from that, he didn't. Well, okay, it was just at any one of these points, like a maze, right? You get these nerves. You can go into any one of these points for hours and get caught just on the. Look at that, Saturn on the IC. He splits with what? I don't want to put up with this anymore. I'm going to do my own thing, and he wants to do it right away, but it's going to happen over 15 years to the midheaven. So it wasn't until Saturn didn't hit his sun till 40, and the descended to 46, 47. Okay, that's the end of the Second World War. Yeah. So, okay, so that's a lot of time. It hits in 1914-15. Where are we here? 1914-15. It's just, yeah. So it's still going through. It hits descendant in 1917, but in this whole period here, this was the period of leaving Freud, struggling to be on his own, having to work. He was a commandant. He was a doctor and the commandant of a Swiss internment camp during the war. And then Saturn hit his descendant by 1917. And that was 1917. What do we have? He publishes 7 sermons to the dead. Okay, well, with the Aquarius ascendant and Saturn in the first house and the Jupiter in the 8th house, being able to publish something about the dead, it kind of archetypally, it kind of sits there. But that was the end of a really tumultuous, difficult time. He had a lot of difficulties through this time. Going on his own. See, that Sun in the 7th house squaring his Neptune creates codependencies. We're relating, and there's a twist, there's a catch, there's a codependency. So he had a codependency with Freud, and he benefited from studying from him, and he gained his position from going along with him. But at the same time, it wasn't working the way he wants. When he broke away from it, he was breaking his own codependency, and that caused him struggles to. I got to do this myself, or as best as I could by himself. Fortunately, he was buffered by a well-off wife. Okay, now in this period, there were clients going between the wife, Freud, and Jung, and they were exchanged of things. So it's an interesting story if you want to follow through. I don't want to get stuck on this. So let's just,